Hello, fellow splitting geniuses. Welcome to another episode of Splitting Smart, where Heather and I get to have candid and super informative discussions with divorce and well-being professionals. Our goal is to provide you with knowledge on various modalities of support that can help you to unhitch with fewer hitches. So after all, we know knowledge is the antidote to fear. Today's topic not only goes over how important it is to find the right lawyer for you and avoid the most common emotional and financial mistakes during divorce, but it's also how to identify and understand and manage estrangement and parental alienation. So today is our first Facebook Live. So bear with us if we have any technical glitches, but we would love to hear from you if you have any questions. Heather is going to be monitoring it. I am Lila Aiken-Ali, a divorce coach, and the founder of Split.fyi.
And I'm Heather Steer, a divorcee, a CDFA, divorce coach, and the other co-founder of Split.fyi. And I wanted, before we introduce, we gave a little bit of an overview on our next guest, but we wanted to mention that if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the Facebook Live chat or follow up with us afterwards, and we'll give you the information on how to contact our guest as well. So, and without further ado, today's guest is a private investigator turned divorce coach and an expert in parental alienation cases, Susan Shofer. Susan is not only well-versed in when it comes to estrangement and parental alienation cases, but she understands the language choice that needs to be associated to every case in order to set the bar and mitigate the potential problems with a contact order. Welcome, Susan, to our show. We're so grateful to have you here and for you to share your wisdoms and insights on, really a super heavy topic.
Hi, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with both of you today. In your first Facebook Live.
Facebook Live.
Yeah.
This is great.
So I know that we've spoken before and we actually spoke at length. I mean, I think one of our conversations was supposed to be like maybe 30 minutes and it turned into like almost an hour and a half. So we can talk about the subject on and on. But I think the key over here is for the audience to get to know you. Why and how are you now also the expert in this? And I think your background has a lot to do with it. I mean, being a private investigator, wow. I mean, you know how to find information for sure. So I'm just going to let you take the stage on a little bit about that trajectory and how it started and where you are at now.
Well, that is huge, for sure. I was a private investigator, corporate investigator for a long time and spent a lot of time in the courtroom. Went through my own high contentious, high conflict divorce over a decade ago and was a public speaker for a parenting group here in my city of Baltimore. And one day, a social worker, a therapist, said to me, "You really understand divorce like nobody's business. You should be a divorce coach." And I said to her, "I no longer want to know you." And I ran away.
I love that.
And then 6 months later, on the other side of town, close to DC, an attorney said the same thing to me. And I said, "I don't want to know you either." But the truth of it is, something resonated with me. For two people in professions that are steeped in divorce to feel as though I had a grasp on this based on my own divorce, as well as just talking with other people. And the other piece of this too, which kind of segued me into being a divorce coach, is that when I went through my divorce, I thought I had it in the bag. And I say this a lot. I've been in the court system. I understand how judges roll. I get it with attorneys. And remember, as a private investigator, we're not litigating the case. We're in the hot seat. So I know what it's like for one side to love me and one side to not love me. And to be in there with the evidence and to know when to talk and when not to talk, which is the most important not to say when you're in the courtroom. And when I went through my own divorce, I was shocked. I was shocked at how different a family law court was. And then I scoured around for a coach and I couldn't find any. Remember, divorce coaches, this is a pretty new profession. It's burgeoning, it's growing by leaps and bounds. And then there's coaches and then there's certified divorce coaches. And that's a big difference. I was able to interview a few coaches. They were life coaches who kind of understood the feelings you go through with divorce, and that's great. But a divorce coach understands the steps. We understand what's going on in the courtroom. We understand parental alienation if there is some. We understand custody issues. We understand the financial impact. In other words, we really have to know the nuances of divorce. We're not attorneys, we're not therapists, although most of us, in fact, I believe to get certified, you need a college degree, either in law enforcement, legal, on the legal side, or the therapeutic side, so that we come to the profession already professionals in those particular fields. So it's not as though we're wet behind the ears. And so then, for some reason, I became the parental alienation person, and I'm a member of the Parental Alienation Study Group, and really do understand what drives a person to alienate. I've done a tremendous amount of study. I'm going to continue my studies, and it just is a phenomena that seems to be getting worse with time. I think social media is able to compound it as well as hide it in a different way than it was overtly. And then the other problem is that parental alienation is a term that really sets people on fire. There's a lot of naysayers, excuse me, who call it junk science, and I resent that. And the reason they call it junk science or pseudoscience is because the American Psychological Association and the DSM-4 and World Health Organization do not recognize parental alienation as a mental health disorder. They're not saying it doesn't happen. And I haven't met a judge or an attorney, and I've talked to many over the years who have said there's no such thing. In fact, they get it, they know it. It does happen. For sure, it does happen.
100%. But this is what's interesting to me, because for the person to be the alienator, the one who is inflicting that, right? You do have to have some personality disorder, no? So why are they, is it because they're just taking the name parental alienation isn't? But then what about the person who, like, let's forget the name. What about the people who are doing it, right? Who think that that's okay to do something like that? That's where they really, they're missing the point, I feel. It shouldn't have to be that, it is said that parental alienation is a personality disorder. No, that isn't, the word isn't, but the people who are doing it, definitely.
I agree with you. And the experts, the people who have devoted their careers, and I don't mean a week of career,
right.
4 and 5 decades of their careers, clinicians, legal professionals who've really devoted every aspect of their career into the study of this will speak to the very thing that you're talking about. However, in order to get the American Psychiatric Association to include it as a mental health disorder, they don't look at the alienator, they look at what that does to the mental health of the child. And that is the piece of it. We can all sit here and say, we can imagine what this does to the child. And there's been studies, but to get something sanctioned, it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of detail. It's minutia outside of my hands. It's clinicians, it's people who really devote their lives to collecting data and studies. And when that comes out, then there's people to refute it. No different than Tourette's used to be considered it wasn't in the DSM-4, or it was a mental illness. Now we know it's not. So people who had Tourette's were treated mentally ill. Now we know it's a neurological issue. Or homosexuality was a disorder in the DSM-3 or 2 or whatever numbers they were. Nobody out there hold me to that. But now we know it no longer is. So this is fluid, but to get this sanctioned has had its challenges. In the meanwhile, there are people who are being alienated from their children. And the problem that we run into is, like you said, what is estrangement? When maybe a parent left the family for whatever reason, they come back after 3 years, and the children who were 3 and 5 when they left are now 6 and 8 and don't come running to them with open arms, and they say, oh, my ex is alienating. That's not really true. Or if there has been abuse and there's documented abuse, and the operative word is documented.
Right. Exactly.
What I'm talking about when I talk about alienation, and I've talked to hundreds of people maybe more seriously, and there's some key things to look for. Have a great relationship with your child, and then you don't.
Oh, right.
Okay. And you have no idea what happened. None whatsoever.
And
Oh,
can you
wait a minute.
explain
There's the other parent encouraging it.
right, but then explain that because and obviously children also grow and they go through their hormones and they start hating their parents and they have that thing. There's a big stark difference for what you're saying and that your kids decided they don't like you because you're too strict or because they're angry and they're angry because they're a teenager or whatever they are, right? There's a stark difference. It's really like you had a good relationship and all of a sudden your kid repels from you, like doesn't even want to see you, right?
Correct.
Right.
It doesn't always have to be on the heels of a divorce, but more than likely it is.
Right.
I deal with the situations that are intertwined with the divorce. So for example, the parents split up, they have 50-50 visitation, they pick the children up every other Friday. Maybe, let's say the dad's alienating the children from the mother. The mother picks the children up every other Friday. Things are fine. Nothing happens. Anything different in her home, she goes to pick up the children and they say something like, I don't want to go with you this week. And it's not because they don't feel well or they have something going on at a party near their house or a school event. And the exchange would be cumbersome. And actually, these exchanges should not be. They should be worked out by the parents. But then what happens is the child will say something that just doesn't make sense. I don't want to go to mom's house anymore. She's the worst cook. And every time I eat her food, I throw up, which doesn't happen, and then 2 weeks later, the mom may come to the house and the child just won't come outside.
Right.
Then 2 weeks later, the mom will come to the house and the child will text, I can't stand you. You're dead to me. I don't want anything to do with you. And the question becomes, what did they do? And you're correct, Lila, when you say children go through phases. But the truth is, even with teenagers, they don't do that. That's just not how they behave. They may decide they're mad at you because they got a D on a math test and you said to them, you're not going out this weekend.
Right.
And they say, I hate you. I can't stand you. You're the worst mother.
Exactly.
But come Monday morning, they're like, hi, Mom.
Yeah, totally.
You're the
Or even
best.
2 hours later. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Or a couple hours later, if they want to watch something on television and you told them no Netflix, but and then they sort of cozy up to you. We all know how teenagers operate. We were once teenagers, and if we've had teenager children, it's almost predictable. But with alienation, it's different.
Okay.
And also, the allegations are typically either they're false narratives, just completely made up. I've talked to alienated parents, they're like, I have no idea what this child is even talking about. Or they take something and they blow it completely out of proportion. I think I mentioned last week, I had a client once whose son refused to see him, wanted his mom to see the dad, because he claimed that when they were in Hawaii, dad did not let him get lobster for dinner.
Right. I mean, right.
How many of us could now say we hate our parents? I can. Can you?
I know, exactly.
When an 8-year-old says, I want lobster and it's $35, and the parent says, maybe not this time.
Right, exactly.
For whatever reason. And even if the child got a little bit upset, they get over it.
Right.
The other piece of it is that this child knows the other parent, the alienating parent, is sanctioning this. Because in a normal divorce, and there are normal healthy divorces where both parents are co-parent very well, and we can talk about that a little later on today, but the alienating parent will say something to that response, well, see, that's why I'm not married to your mom.
Right.
This is the way, she's a terrible cook. I got sick all the time too. Or, yeah, your dad's stingy and cheap and, don't go with him next time because the same thing's going to happen. So it's sort of sanctioned by that other parent. And the truth is, I mean, the children will pit parents against each other, but this is a slam dunk.
This is fostered by the parent. It's
Oh,
not fostered by the child. It might start with the child saying, okay, let's play my parents together. But then the golden opportunity is seen. And then it's in some cases, right?
The kid does the bidding. The kid does the bidding.
Right.
So, and then what happens, and this is fabulous, just fabulous, and I say that tongue in cheek, where the child will refuse maybe to go with the dad. And the mom will stand outside and just say, I don't understand why this is happening. I mean, he's welcome to go with you. I don't know why he doesn't want to go.
Right.
She knows exactly why he doesn't want to go.
Right.
She's done a real good job of indoctrinating that child. And there's no way on this planet that child would get in the car with the dad. Because if the mom thought for a New York minute that child would get in the car, she wouldn't do that. She wouldn't be so willing. So when we see that,
right,
that's a real red flag. Because in healthy splits and the parents co-parent, when they notice that one child doesn't want to be with the other child, with the other parent, the non-targeted parent gets upset. They're like, what's going on?
right.
Why don't you want to go to dad's? And then she may call the dad and say, I don't know why he doesn't want to come. Did something happen? Let's talk this over. I think something may be wrong. Let's figure this out because he's got to go to your house. See the difference?
I do.
Huge difference.
The thing is this, and this is why it's such a touchy subject, because there's a lot of fear instilled in parents when the child is with the other parent, right? And saying, what is being said? What are they saying about me? How is it saying? And it does come out in conversation sometimes. In healthy co-parenting relationships, that there's things that are flippantly said, right? Probably either by mistake or intentionally, but just because somebody wants to let off some kind of steam and they don't think they're doing any harm. There's a stark difference between that and completely indoctrinating your child into believing that parent has these problems, so to speak, right? So for example, and I'm just going to take this as an example because early on, and I made it a point, I'm not going to talk about my ex-husband in a bad way because I don't want that. I remember my mother used to say certain things and it would drive me crazy, even though I was a lot older. I don't want to hear any bad things about my dad, right? So, and I was old enough to just stand my ground and say that. And she did it not in a really evil way. She was just letting off her steam and thought I was mature enough to understand it, right? When my daughter was younger, and I remember the only bad thing I said was, he's a really bad driver, because it was on the subject of driving. And right there and then she got so angry that I said something about, and I was like, oh my God. And I thought that wasn't such a bad thing to say. But then I realized that's my dad. Don't say that about my dad. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, years later, she's like, you're right, Mom, Dad's a really bad driver. And it was really funny. It was funny. And then I was like, yeah. And I just laughed it off and I did not take the opportunity to go on and on about it. However, so those things can be said. And that's what I want people to understand, because I have people coming to me going, well, he said this or she said that, and that's unhealthy. And I said, listen, you have to monitor it. And that goes to my second question about, okay, this can be an issue. There are red flags to look after, but how do you monitor it? What do you look out for? And besides the cut of, I don't want to see you anymore, before that happens, what can you look out for?
There are a few things, and it also depends on the age of the child. When you start to hear things come out of a child's mouth that are really age inappropriate. For example, I had a client whose child was 5 and was saying things like, Mom, it's really terrible of you. You took all of Dad's money in the divorce. 5-year-olds don't talk like that.
No.
They just don't. Or the 6-year-old is like, I am not going to, Dad, I don't want to come to your house. I hate your girlfriend. She's a whore.
Right.
I mean, a 6-year-old just doesn't talk like that. So you have to have your red flag. When you hear that, what I tell people, and this is cumbersome, people hate when I say this, start documenting. This is the PI that comes out of me. Okay. If there's anything I have to tell anybody, is that you cannot go to court unprepared. When this starts, we usually just go, oh, he just said something kind of jerky, and I'm coloring that lightly, but we just may say, oh, he just said that. But then that may be the foundation. Mm-hmm. And then we may end up in court a year later, or a year and a half later. And if you say to a judge, it kind of started because they don't want to hear it. But if you can say, you know what, on February the 24th, my daughter came to me and said, or you document, and you have all of this really well documented, it can only help your case.
Right.
If you should need it in the future. So you listen to some of the things the children say. The other thing, and also in line with that, is sometimes children will say, you know, Dad, Mom showed me the court, the divorce decree, and like, I can't believe you're not going to pay child support. I can't believe you're fighting that.
Wow.
It is not unusual. In fact, it's highly probable that the alienated parent is sharing court documents. Now, I can tell you, as a private investigator, I've had to read a lot of court documents, and I always find that there's places where the language could use some interpretation.
Right.
Then my question becomes, like, how does a 9-year-old disseminate this information? It's completely out of their realm of understanding. Well, they don't understand it,
No.
but they do have an interpreter, and it's called, that person is the alienating parent who's sitting right beside them and saying, look at this, look at this. I asked for $5,000 a month for child support. He's only giving $1,900. You know why? He doesn't care about you. And he's spending all that money on his girlfriend, the whore. And that narrative comes into play. What the alienator has to do primarily is have that child not trust or fear the targeted parent. They will always love that parent. It's not about taking away the love. It's creating fear and mistrust in the other parent. So if a child thinks that dad likes his girlfriend more, doesn't want to pay child support, is taking mom to court to try and hurt her and hurt the child's going to fear that parent.
Of course. Right.
And one of the major lines that you hear is, you know, your mom likes her new boyfriend more than she likes you guys. I have a client right now who's 3 years post-divorced. 3 years. She just started dating the first person 6 months ago, first person that she's had a relationship with. And her ex is driving by her house during the weeks that he has the children and says, do you see her boyfriend's car in the garage? And pulls over the side of the road and has them look. See, she likes him more than she likes you. The children have not met the boyfriend 6 months now, which I applaud this mom. And the children are like 10 and 12. These aren't like little babies.
Oh.
Mom's like, we are waiting until we know this is serious before we introduce, you know. And so she's within her right to date somebody. She's 3 years post-divorce, and yet the dad is setting up. And by the way, the kids don't want to have anything to do with her.
Okay, so how, if there is a way, how do you mitigate something like that from spiraling down into a place where you can't go back? And that's where, unfortunately, and I know, and we're going to get to this because you've shared some stories of adults who have been alienated, you know, as a child by their parents and are telling their stories, which is really important and really important for people to hear this, those stories. But is there any way that they can mitigate?
I have to tell you, and I say this over and over, almost like a broken record, and that is, you really need an attorney who understands this. The courts don't like psychological mishmash talk. They just don't. The court is really about the law, upholding the law, when the law is broken, how to sanction, or punishments for breaking the law. And in civil court, who broke what contract, how to amend contracts, how to get rid of contract, whatever it is. And divorce is a contract, and they want to dissolve the contract. With it comes a settlement. They don't want to talk about all the touchy-feely, hurt feelings. That's just too much.
Yeah.
It really takes a skilled attorney who understands parental alienation, understands how it happens, so that it can be presented to the court in a way that the court understands without using the term parental alienation. That the child is missing out on a relationship with the parent.
Mm-hmm. So that's key. Do not.
Key. And that's what I've shared with people, because when you get in a courtroom and you're like, he's taking my time, she's taking my time. No, that's my time, my time, my time. The judges see it as, you know what, this is just a factor of high contentious divorce. The kids are in the crossfire. Not really with parental alienation. I mean, they're in the crossfire for sure, but they're not in the crossfire. They're the target. I mean, they're the weapon. You know, they're the weapon, and there's a targeted parent, and they are just being shot at this target. Therefore, it takes an attorney who has the skill to litigate these.
Right.
And if they don't have the skill, they don't go well. They just don't go well. And I've spent a lot of time this year, more than ever in my career, with people and their attorneys.
Right.
Where attorneys will say, tell me what I should say, or how should I approach this? And then the other piece of it, it's hard to say universal, because every jurisdiction is different and judges are different.
Right.
I mean, I know in my jurisdiction, there are judges who you cannot say parental alienation in court. You will just nail it, nail the coffin, drop it down your coffin. And then there's others, you start describing what's happening and they'll say, this is parental alienation. Right. And the alienated parent will have their, hat handed to them. So it all still comes down to the skill of the attorney, because the attorney knows their jurisdiction. They know the judges in their courthouse. They know who accepts what, who's a little stronger with that language or less. So it is the skill of the attorney.
Now, how does an evaluator play a role in all of this too? And can you choose the evaluator that you do, or is that, so the court appoints an evaluator?
Correct.
And what kind of background do they have to understand parental alienation, if any?
I'm on the fence about how I feel about custody evaluators.
Right.
Because there are good ones and there are bad ones.
Okay.
Typically, they are required to have a social worker license.
Okay.
Hopefully, and I use the word hopefully tongue-in-cheek, that they have a background in parental alienation. Many do not. I've interviewed some and asked them to mention some of the manifestations, and they don't know them, which is disheartening. I mean, how can they diagnose something without? No, it's like, how could a doctor tell you you have the flu if they don't know the symptoms, right? And so it's the same thing here. I've had clients say to me, well, I want a custody evaluation. I'm going to get a custody evaluation. Be careful what you wish for, because if you get a custody evaluator who comes in day one and doesn't like you, you may be called, because the judges listen to the evaluators. The judges, remember I mentioned before, they don't like the psychological stuff. They don't want to hear about he said, she said, the kids didn't do that, and they didn't show up on this time, and this one didn't let that one go to soccer, and this one made that one miss ballet. They don't want to hear it. No. That's what the custody evaluator does. So typically what they will do is they will meet with the mother and the father separately, or mother, father for the same sex marriage. They will meet with the children individually. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they should, not always. They will interact or watch how parents interact with the children individually and then together. And they will also talk to teachers, therapists, coaches, right, friends, neighbors. The problem with that is if an alienator is able to friend up and cozy up to the custody evaluator, then the case is cooked. And if the evaluator makes a recommendation, the courts will pretty much listen to it. I mean, it's pretty much etched in stone. Mm-hmm.
So very difficult. Mm-hmm. And what if you don't have the means to have a very sophisticated lawyer who's well versed within this? What are some of the things that people can do? I mean, I know your services are very helpful. I know some people just listen. Not everyone can afford legal counsel, but they are frustrated with the system. The system has done them wrong. And a lot of times they cannot see their children. They're meant to see their children. There's so many frustrated parents out there who are in this situation, but can't just afford to go to these lawyers who are well-versed in this. What are the alternatives?
Are you talking about divorce in general or divorce with parental alienation? Because those
parental alienation.
The ones with alienation, this is hard for me to say. You really have to find the best. I mean, I can find resources for people and reach out to find them attorneys that specialize in this. And then hopefully they can work something out with that attorney. Because here's what I see.
Okay.
My practice consists of people who come to me, they're on the fourth or fifth attorney.
Right.
And when I find out what they've spent, I basically have to stand back and take a deep breath.
Money and years of their lives. I mean, years.
Yeah. I mean, it's time that ticks away. And if I can just mention here, when children are involved in a healthy divorce, and for example, if the parents have 1 week off, 1 week on, and they switch off, even the week that the other parent is not with the child physically, if there's something monumental in that child's life, they get a great grade on the test, or they get asked to be homecoming queen or king or person, or they get into a certain college, or they find out that they've been picked for a cum laude in 8th grade, whatever it is, or they get sick. The other parent encourages them to call the other parent, even though it's their week off. So even though you don't have the children during that week, you still are enmeshed into their lives.
Right.
And if there's a school function or a concert or a soccer game, even though it's your week off, you can be there.
Right.
And parents who have I don't want to say amicable divorce, but a healthy divorce,
Right.
encourage that. What happens with alienation is when the children are away from the parent for a long period of time. I mean, I have clients who haven't seen their kids in 2 years. The parent is dead to them. And I don't mean that literally, but the parent is not part of their day-to-day lives any longer.
No.
They've already grieved the fact that mom's not there every day or dad's there every day, and they have had to grieve it. But now they've moved on. So mom and dad are no longer part of those day-to-day things. And that's very hard to then say to a child, oh, by the way, now you have to go every other week. It really disrupts their lives.
Right.
So I encourage people to do whatever they can. I don't care if they have to sell something, go to their parents. And I don't really like to talk like this because I really believe in keeping yourself financially healthy.
Right.
But when it comes down to PA, you will get dragged through the courts. And if you don't have somebody who really gets it from the beginning, this will be so costly and timely. If you have somebody who understands it, hopefully, I say hopefully, they should be able to stop it in the very beginning if they have the talent, and a good attorney who understands parental alienation is able to do that.
So, okay, so it's a lot. I mean, definitely a lot. And I think that, anybody in this situation, I think there's twofold. There is the fear of it happening. And like we said, let's separate the fact that really it's key just to monitor the things that are being said, monitor what your children are saying to you. If it's just something that's a bit flippant and it doesn't hurt, really differentiate it. Don't automatically assume that the other parent is alienating your child, right? But definitely monitor it. And the key takeaway from this discussion so far is that you need to go find, if this is the onset of something that is happening and alienation is happening, find a legal counsel that is well versed on this topic.
But it's like anything else, Lila. Right. If you think about it, it's like if you went to your general practitioner, and I say this to people all the time, if you go to your general practitioner and they say, you have a heart condition, it won't kill you, but it'll just make you miserable, I need to send you to a cardiologist. You go to a cardiologist who says, okay, I have some meds. I see this sometimes, not a lot, and I'll give you some meds and you feel a little bit okay. But then you find out that there's a doctor who is fabulous. He or she does this all the time. 100% of their patients do well, or 99% of your patients. What will you do? You will land it to the best doctor.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing here.
It's the same thing.
Not all attorneys are alike. And I want people to know that just because an attorney doesn't understand parental alienation doesn't make them a bad attorney. They are not the attorney for you.
Right.
And that's okay. You don't want an attorney who really doesn't understand it to get knee deep into it, because then everything goes south. And it's not fair to you, and it's not fair to the attorney. It's a lose-lose for both.
And so when, and another thing that we were taking away is that take notes, write down everything. I know it's tedious, but it is so true. And everything down to the date. So it helps your case 100%. What else is another key takeaway? So we've got attorney. We've got write down your notes. We have just monitor the situation and write down, well, is there anything, and I don't know, in all your studies and everybody you've worked with, what can a parent do who's being alienated to the child and provide for the child when they're with the child, or if they ever get to see the child or try to talk to the child? What can they say? Is there anything they can do to try to knock that child into some kind of, we're still here, we're still your parent?
Well, the way you parent differs. So for example, if you're not 100% alienated, or the child's forced to go with you, and you say something like, we're having dinner in 10 minutes, put away the computer, I've asked you 3 times, close up the computer, I'm taking it away. It's a weekend. They've done their homework with their young kids and they don't do it. 3 strikes, you're out. They take the computer. In a normal, healthy divorce, that child may call the other parent and say, you know what, mom took away the computer. I can't believe that. And the other parent would say, well, what did you do? Well, and they find out and both parents are on board. With
Right.
the alienated parent, that child calls the parent, the alienator, mom took away the computer, and the dad will say, well, she's a bitch,
Right.
there you go. She'll take it away from you forever. So your parenting changes.
Right.
Doesn't mean you have to allow children to be abusive to you. And some of these children start to hit, spit, kick at, call you names. It's really hard to hear a child speak to you like that. The best thing to do, and this is hard, you act like the other person doesn't live any longer, the other parent. You don't talk about them, don't talk about anything that happens with that other parent or what that other parent is doing, because that child is already the front person for them. They will defend that parent. That parent, and I've said this before, that parent could stand next to a dead body, smoking gun in their hand, bullet from the gun identified into the body, and that child would swear that the parent didn't do it.
Right.
That's just how protective they are of the parent. So you can't say anything. Just be a loving, caring parent. And if the children say things like, you never do anything with me, you just remind them, go, really? Because we went to Disney World last year. We had a great time. Remember, you wanted the themed park, you had breakfast, and we saw Goofy, and bring those things up to them without getting adversarial. Instead of saying, because a lot of parents are like, what, are you kidding?
Right.
You forgot that? Are you kidding me?
Right.
Of course we went. You go, really? I'm so sorry you forgot that, because that was like one of the best trips we ever had. Don't you remember? And kind of spin it that way.
Okay. That's great.
It's tough.
Very tough. Very hard.
The other thing I do say to parents, and that is, don't give up. I know this is so hard to hear because sometimes you get financially, emotionally just beaten up, but I have not talked to one adult, not one, who's been alienated, who hasn't said the worst thing is when my other parent gave up.
Okay. And I
fell up hearing that.
Yes,
I fell up hearing that because I had somebody tell me that week her dad would come to the door to come get her, and her mother and her mother's boyfriend would tell her, we're going to act like we're not home. So they would park the car down the street and they would hide like in another part of the house as the dad knocked and rang the doorbell, and they're laughing, and sometimes they had friends over and they're laughing. And this girl laughed too, but then she went upstairs every night and cried.
Right.
And she said the worst day was when dad didn't show up. Understandably, after 2 or 3 years of this, somebody would say, you let that happen 2 or 3 years, but he did that week in and week out. But she knew he was coming.
Right. So there's something that she was still attached to him because she knew that he was coming. Right.
She was still attached when she went upstairs and cried in her bedroom.
Of course.
The alienator doesn't know this. and I don't think they care. The alienator is so hyper-focused to the point of unhealthy. Sometimes people say, are they narcissists? I mean, every client who calls me starts with, he's a narcissist or she's a sociopath. I don't know if they are. I really don't know. And I don't want to diagnose somebody. I'm not trained to do so,
No.
nor would I. But here's what I know. If you're doing that to your kid, something's not right in River City, right? I mean, who does this?
No.
Who does this to their child?
Now, there's another thing I wanted to touch point. And in fact, I mean, again, it's a very heavy conversation because there's also that ambiguity, like that place where a child also doesn't want to be with their parent. I mean, things have changed in the scope of 10 years, right? Like when we were younger, when I was younger, we didn't have a lot of say of how we wanted to be parented. So kids today have a little bit more say in it, and they're more empowered. They're learning more, constantly learning more about also just how to interact with human beings, a lot more. I mean, therapy is rampant. Everybody goes to therapy once in their life now. It's like, back then it wasn't like that, right? Mm-hmm. So when your parents were strict and your parents said something, it was what your parents said, even if you didn't like the way they said it. You grit your teeth and, and you deal with those issues later on in life when you go to therapy, right? That's true. And so now things have changed. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky because, and I do know I have, lots of people that struggle with this when their child doesn't want to go with their parent themselves. This has nothing to do with the parent that's alienating, or saying anything. It's the child who doesn't like the other parent. Now, it could be because they prefer one parent over the other because maybe one parent is more lenient or more fun or whatever it is. I mean, there's always, a child has its own ways of thinking, like a kid or even a teenager, hey, dad's house is way more fun and I can drink beer there or whatever,
Hello. And my boyfriend can sleep over even though I'm 15.
Right. I mean,
Mom makes me do my homework and take out the trash.
Totally. I mean, there's a litany of things that you can actually, get away with in one parent's house more than the other. Trust me. I mean, that's usually the case. Usually,
and it's the case, by the way, it's the case in regular households. I remember being in 7th grade and asking my mom if I could have a Halloween party. She's like, absolutely not. I went, through the kitchen over into the family room, into the den and said to my dad, can I have a Halloween party? He goes, sure.
Totally. So exactly.
Oh, yeah. And then I was told the next time I'll have a third Halloween party, I'll be 37.
Right. Right. Mom reined it in, right? So this is my point. But so how do you differentiate that? Because I think that's where it's a very tricky situation because kids, as we know, can be manipulative and they want what they want.
Sure. And well, there's a difference there. There's a difference there. First of all, yes, there are personality styles, even in intact marriages, where children will favor one parent over another. So if they're in intact marriage, happy marriage, they hang out with mom more, they hang out with dad more. What we're talking about is not a child who prefers to be at dad's house more, but still loves mom, still goes over her house, will spend the weekends. Maybe they'll change custody. By the way, in divorce, there's 2 things that you can modify post-divorce: child support and custody.
Right.
Everything else is etched in stone. And the reason that's more fluid is because, first of all, people lose jobs or change jobs. So salaries can change, children grow up, things change that way. And also because sometimes it may be the best interest of a child to be at one parent's more than another.
Mm-hmm.
The daughter's having maybe eating disorder issues and mom can deal with them better than maybe dad. And dad actually will say, you know what, maybe it's better she's at your house a little bit more. She can come at my house on weekends. This is not what we're talking about. No. This has a very different, blatant feel to it. Now, there are some times where it's like shades of gray, like you brought up.
Yeah.
But with parental alienation, it's pretty, for those of us who do it, we can kind of recognize it. Yeah. Now, the problem for some of these kids is that the courts, like you said, are empowered. I say entitled, but also empowered. We give children more power, which is good in a lot of ways. Children were not listened to 20, 30, 40, 50 or more years ago, and they were sexually abused or things happened to them, and the courts really didn't hear it. So they're listened to more. And the courts will allow these children to say what they want at about age 12 or 13 and really take that into consideration. And that's unfortunate when there's alienation.
Right.
Because when there's alienation, the child goes right with that targeted parent who will continue to erode whatever's left of the relationship with that targeted parent.
I know.
Until it's down to nothing. And so many cases I get, or so many clients come to me, I don't say cases because I don't try the cases, but so many clients I get come to me when they have a 13, 14, 15-year-old and they went to court when they were 12 or 13 and said, well, you can spend more time at dad's or spend time at dad's or mom's.
Right.
And then that to the alienator, that's like pay dirt. You know, it's like, yes, I got the kid.
Right. Really sad seeing it happen.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, there's so many things we can talk about. We're already at almost an hour, which I think that we're going to have another live because there's such a deep dive into so many different psyches about what you can do. And I think the storyline, and I really want to say a couple of things. I think that the parents shouldn't be fearful when they hear their kid coming back and be like, no, dad said that, you don't really clean the dishes right. I mean, okay, just, here's some silly things. Like I said, he's a bad driver, those things. And really there was no ill intention in any way. So just hear it out, a couple of things, take note of anything, continue to take note when their kid comes back and what they're saying. Very key. Start with one thing. Don't overlook anything. Just keep taking notes. So that's the key over here to understand where it's going. And yeah, I think that, everything that you said was really important to hear. I think that finding the right lawyer, super, super important. Heather, I don't know if there was any questions in the group.
There was not anything specific that I could get for examples, but what an amazing conversation, ladies.
Right.
It was so fantastic. And I know that hopefully people will come and watch this content afterwards because it was really, a powerful conversation. So thank you, Susan. One thing that I would like to do, and maybe you can put it in our chat here, is get it over onto our comments, or just make sure that we know how to have people contact you.
Yes.
When they watch this
Okay.
as well. So
Okay.
I'll get it.
I'll do that. Will you still, when we're off, will you still have the chat up for a second? Or
Yes.
Okay, great.
Oh, perfect. But I think this was great. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.